Watching TVC Breakfast, we now move to this conversation. Now, Nigeria's political atmosphere is heating up as the House of Representatives summon an emergency sitting ahead of the 2027 general elections. Now, lawmakers are expected to reconvene later today to review issues arising from the election timetable recently announced by INEC and a move described by the Speaker's office as constitutionally significant. The House spokesperson Akin Rotimi says the session shows the chamber's resolve to act swiftly on matters affecting Nigeria's democratic process, with members urged to prioritize attendance. As the House pledged to strengthen democratic institutions through responsive lawmaking, will this emergency sitting redefine the road to 2027? Now, joining us for this conversation is lawyer, public affairs analyst Fred Nzeako. Hello, sir. Good morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you for joining us. Now, we go straight into this conversation. You know, the electoral reform started with a lot of drama. You know, there were protests here and there, and then they brought out a date. Now, the date is out. They said, oh, Ramadan, you know, they're thinking of changing the date. We're also hearing January as well. But I want you to unpack this for us. We're also saying that they're also going to be sitting about this real-time, you know, election. Oftentimes, we've said we want to see the election real-time, but INEC, they're saying that National Assembly is saying that we cannot give this real-time because we know they might be hijacking of the servers and all of that. I quickly just want you to unpack this whole drama for us. And then I know the National Assembly is sitting today. What are some of the things that you expect to be the outcome?
Well, when you describe that thing as electoral reform, it is not a reform. It's just trying to adjust the 2022 Electoral Act, you know, to bring it in tandem with the current realities. Because if we are talking about the electoral reform, we should be starting from the appointment of election management body, where we said that the president, who is a participant, a political participant in an election, should not be the one to appoint the chairman of INEC or the National Electoral Commissioners, or even the REC. We have said that the Candidature report recommended that to government, but unfortunately that is not being taken care of. So, and that is when we talk about reform. That's where we begin to look at reform holistically. Right. And then the second aspect of reform that we expected, if we call it reform, is that we said that in every election cycle, the litigation aspect of election must be concluded before anybody is sworn in. Have you had anybody talk about that as we speak? So this is not electoral reform at all. I take exception to such qualification. This is just an amendment of the 2022 Electoral Act. And the critical aspect of that act that brought this amendment is the one that the National Assembly, the Senate, let me respect the House of Reps, they have done what is right. It's the one that the Senate want to sweep under the carpet. And because that was the hullabaloo about 2023 election, when you're talking about transmission of results, I recall that INEC promised Nigerians that there will be real-time transmission of results. And they didn't say that from the blues. They conducted an experiment, they conducted their research, they did everything they were supposed to do. They came to the floor of the Parliament, House of Reps in 2018, and they spoke to parliamentarians and told them that they were ready. When the parliamentarians expressed fear about the issue of internet coverage around the country, and INEC said that they had met with the telcos, and that Nigeria had at least 97–98% coverage when you're talking about 2G, and that the technology that they wanted to deploy was enough, that 2G was enough for that technology, so that nobody needed to worry about that. And they convinced the House of Reps. Now, that was where the issue of transmission and transfer eventually that came out, it became transfer, came out. But Nigerians felt that real-time transmission of results, that was the bulwark of 2023 election. And the very moment INEC failed to do that, the whole trust got lost. The whole trust deficit now arose. By the time they went to court, the judges themselves had. That's when we said a judge's hand is tied. It is metaphorical. It does not mean that somebody would band his hands, but the law will tie his hands. When he tried to interpret the law, when he's trying to look at the implementation, then he will look at strictly what the law has said. And because it was not made essentially a justiciable issue, and it was not easy for the court. And then analysts now said, look, this time around, we must get it right. And there must be a real-time mandatory transmission of election results. Because anybody who is telling you that we don't have the capacity, I sit here to say with all modesty that the person is not being honest.
No, but they've spoken about network issues as well. Let's not forget
in
that.
2018, we are talking about 8 years from today. INEC went to the floor of the parliament and made their presentation. And beside INEC then was NCC, Nigerian Communication Commission, that is in charge of anything telecommunication in Nigeria. INEC was sitting, NCC was sitting, and it was a robust engagement. And in that engagement, they convinced the parliament. As a matter of fact, it was even the opposition then that was afraid that, because you see, this kind of policy that we play here in this country, where once one party, especially party in power, is moving in one direction, opposition is looking in the other direction. It was opposition that raised the problems and said, look, that this is not possible. And INEC went to the floor and convinced the parliament that they were ready. And they had conducted their research around the whole country. And they had even experimented on that. So that, and that was when this idea of 97-98% coverage of 2G, not 5G, not 4G, 2G. Then it was then that Chairman of INEC explained to parliamentarians that the bimodal, of course, you remember that was when the BVAS was introduced. Then, before then, we had the card reader, which was introduced in 2014, that was used first in 2015 election, and the card reader had its own limitations. The BVAS was an improvement of the card reader, a very robust improvement that was more or less like a mobile computing equipment, so that the BVAS they wanted to introduce would transmit results real-time online.
Okay,
Mr. And second, I'm coming. Let me land on my thought. And that if there was no network, immediately, once you shift from that location, it will transmit just like your smartphone will do if you are sending a WhatsApp message. So I think it is not an argument.
So I think essentially we are all saying the same thing. It's just about the operational term, real-time, electronic transmission of results. You've in one breath said that it is possible. In the same vein, you've also said that if it's not done at that time, there should be a way to accommodate the fact that they can move to where there is network and then it is transmitted. That is no longer real time. Let me break it down.
I'm putting INEC.
Yeah. Okay, so let me break it down. So when we say that the bimodal voter accreditation system, which is the BVAS, it is one thing we should realize is that names of those who are there to vote is already captured in the BVAS. It has been configured to identify the voters that are going to be using this machine. That's why when it fails, they call for another one, and then they configure it so that it is not the same thing as accessing the internet. I hope you get the point I'm trying to make. So if you look at the Senate is saying that the presiding officer, according to Section 60, subsection 3, which has been the bone of contention, they said that the presiding officer shall electronically transmit the result from each polling unit to IREF portal, and such transmission shall be done after the prescribed form EC8A has been signed and stamped by the presiding officer. So they also said the other clause which you now mentioned is...
Yeah, but there's no confusion there, Brian.
The thing there is, when we now say real-time transmission of election results, we are not doing electronic voting. And we also remember what's it called? A video of a man of a popular presidential candidate then in 2023 who boastfully said, we can rig the election in your favor. We can access the server. And INEC confirmed that more than 13 million times or thereabout, the IREF was going to be put under attack. So if we know that this cannot be transmitted immediately, we are done signing and everything, and we are going to move further. Do you not feel this will cause a problem when we get to court and they're asking, at what time did you finish the election, and at what time did you transmit? Ibrahim, will that cause a problem?
Ibrahim, you are creating an imaginary problem by yourself. I'll tell you why. From EC8A, which is the primary result sheet in every election, that is the fundamental document that you use to assess information about election result. By the time you finish filling from EC8A and it is signed by the agents, of course, don't forget that the law does not provide that agents must sign. Any agent that decides not to sign is his own business. It is the INEC officials that their own signature that is important. After the signing, you snap it. It is already held in the beavers. You send it. That from EC8A is there. If you now send it, and of course there was, even when you are, no matter how sophisticated an environment is, there could be some seconds of downtime. Yeah. Electoral transmission does not mean that immediately you send it doesn't go. Then
so what is the meaning of real time?
No, that's not real time. What it means is that you send it to IREF. And when you say real time means you don't have to wait till the next day. As you're doing it, it is going. And that is why in making laws, what I expected them to say is, if peradventure you send it real time and it doesn't go, you are free to now start advancing towards the collation center. In between, it will go. And if it doesn't go, you have electronic, you have the manual. But that the manual can never replace the electronic. That is the bone of contention. That the manual collation can never replace the electronic. The manual can only serve as a backup. Fine. But it can never replace the electronic.
No, Fred, I would not agree on that.
No, I know you will not.
Data source.
All right, so we would just hold your thoughts, Mr. Shomi. Let's quickly go on a commercial break. We'll be right back. All right, you're still watching TVC Breakfast, and we're talking about the recent electoral reforms. Mr. Biodun, over to you.
Yeah, I think I don't share your viewpoint on some of the issues. For instance, if you look at what you are describing as real time is optical, scanning system, which the Americans are doing. And that is when you scan it and save it and send it, because that's the American system. They're not doing real time in America. You can please check that out. Number two, we also need to understand certain things, that you don't need to go far. In Lagos here, if you go towards Epe, Ketu in Epe, the government college in Ketu, go just down that community, the road beside it, all that area, huge community, no network coverage, zero. I'm saying zero data network. Even to make a call is difficult.
And they are Nigerians.
Yes, yes. Go towards Aton is a community of over 300,000 people. That is about 25% of that area, around Leshi, Agonele Lubo, Wasimi Alaga, Idira, and all these areas. About 25% of it, over 300,000 population, zero data coverage. Go from there, go towards Igbora, Oyo State. Once you leave Randa, you leave Ogun Osun River Basin. There is no power line, even from after Alamutu towards before you get to Igbora. None. You have 62 villages there. They have secondary school, they have primary school. If they want to sit for the exam, they come to the city in Abeokuta. That takes them about 45 minutes to 1 hour. Zero data connection. What they have, you will have to take your phone to roam around in order to get even a voice call connection. So leave that. That's so close to Lagos. Now, what is the fate of riverine areas? What about the north? Many huge population and rural people will be cut off. If you bear in mind that INEC admitted to the fact that we have, according to INEC, not NCC, we have 93% coverage, and then you have 7% left. Our population is 235,000. If you take account of that 7%, you realize that translates, to over 60 million people. But let's even assume 50% of them are eligible to vote. That's 8 million. What is the difference, between the winner of the last election and the runners-ups? When you add it together, that 8 million people that will be disenfranchised is more. We should be looking at building a more inclusive, voting population rather than exclusive voting population. I think you are basing your analysis more on the experiences of urban center rather than the total coverage of the country. And in any case, I stand to be challenged. Apart from Estonia that was doing internet voting, the best example you have is El Salvador. El Salvador, attempted to have real-time voting in 2019. What it ended up in court, the court had to use the Supreme Court Tribunal in El Salvador had to resort back to manual compilation in order to resolve that case. Apart from that, you take Brazil. Brazil is doing real-time voting. What happened? They started that journey in 1985, and that was when they started building the technology, the IT infrastructure for that purpose. Even then, what happened at the last election, we saw how the whole thing became a mess, and Bolsonaro lost the second time. It became a major problem, a rejection of the real-time voting by the same advocates of it, to the extent that the Americans got involved. Bolsonaro is in jail currently, spending 20 years. So you can see the problem it's creating. Take another country, for instance, take Bangladesh. What happened in Bangladesh? Bangladeshi people embraced real-time voting. They had to quickly abandon it when they knew their country was going on fire. What happened to Pakistan? Pakistan embraced real-time voting, electronic transmission of results. What happened in Pakistan? The country nearly went on fire. We knew the crisis Pakistan had to go through. I stand to be challenged. Not even United Kingdom, Netherlands, Spain, Japan, Germany, all these United States, Canada, all these developed countries with developed IT infrastructure are even practicing real-time voting. Maybe what you meant by real-time voting is the American system of optical scanning of results, and then you don't need to delay it. You take it to wherever you can find signal and then send it. If that is what you're saying, that is not real-time transmission of results.
Abiodu, this your information is relevant to INEC. Package it and send to INEC. Because we are quoting and referencing INEC position as far back as 2018. Today, this is 2026. We are going for election in 2027. It is the duty and responsibility of INEC that has presented to Nigerians. You quoted 93% according to them. In 2028, they were putting 97%, 98%. Now, assuming that it is 93%, according to INEC, fine. How many registered voters do we have in Nigeria? 98 million, as at last election. Yes. How many collected their PVC? About 87 million. How many turned out to vote at the end of the day? On the whole, less than 30 million. It is good that when you are planning, you plan to include everybody. But we know that obviously not everybody would go to vote. But in planning, fine. If the challenge is issue of real time, what of the terminology mandatory? Because it's not even real time that is the problem. It is the word mandatory. Because what mandatory means is that INEC will be compelled to do what is right.
No.
No. What
mandatory
it means?
Mandatory means INEC has no other choice but to transmit electronically, even where there are no signals.
INEC will have no other choice than to do what is right. The era of pick and choose will end. The era of decision by INEC will end. They will now follow what the law says. The law says mandatory transmission of result, so that it will be ending up in the IREF. And at the end of the day, the manual backup will still be there in case. But when you now make it an alternative option, that it is either this or that, it is because of lack of trust that has raised this argument. If INEC was collecting manually and we had no problem, if 30 remain 30 and not automatically turned to 3,000, there won't be issue. But when under INEC manual collection, suddenly 70 will become 700, 110 will become 1,100. That is where the problem lies. And then at the end of the day, there will be several mutilations. It is lack of trust, and which was exacerbated by INEC inaction and terrible human manipulation. Before we deployed technology, computer technology in the banking system, you remember how banking was.
Has it stopped fraud?
No. You remember how banking was in terms of not only delay, but in terms of manipulation, in terms of all the challenges. Yes, it hasn't stopped fraud, but now fraud can be traced. As at that time, it was difficult to trace fraud. With electronic transmission of results, we will trace INEC fraud. Easier than because look, from the ward to local government collation, anything can happen. And anything that happens there will affect national collation. From local government to state collation, anything can happen. And when it happens, it will affect national collation. So, but when there is electronic device used in technology used in election, in the same way you trace fraud in banking, you trace fraud in elections. So that when you have a law against such manipulation, you know who to hold. It is because there is no such system, that is why it is difficult to hold anybody accountable. How many people have gone to jail on account of terrible electoral malpractice? And then we want the country to grow? We cannot grow like this. So let us deploy technology, experiment on it, because we have experimented on manual, it has failed us. When this one fails us, then we will adjust. The country is not ending tomorrow.
Yeah, but Fred, when you look at it this way, the primary source of this data would always be
for ECHA.
Yes,
it is always there. It's always there.
And that is more reliable than any other thing, because that form will be signed by the agents of all.
We don't have problem with from ECHA. We have problem with collation.
Yeah, that's where I'm going.
Yes.
And when you have that, when you have the form ECHA,
2 plus 2 instead of being 4 will become 22.
When they sign the form ECHA, what we end up seeing is that is the same form ECHA that has been signed. That will be forwarded, to
the system,
to the
portal.
Yes, to the portal.
Yes.
So the portal is only for viewing.
It's not only for viewing.
Not for collation. Yeah, that's where I'm going. It is not for collation.
It is actually for viewing.
Look, because Nigerians need to know exactly what the situation is. What people are talking about and what they meant are two different things.
Absolutely.
The ones going, that's the
it is not only from
which is
ECHA.
optical scan results.
Look, don't forget that
or may not work.
From ECHA, you go to ECHB, which is the Word Collation Center. Which is the word result. From B to C, from C to D, and ultimately E. So each of them will be in RF. It is easy to trace.
No, it's the compilation. That's what we're saying. The final compilation will still be done manually.
It is
so
not.
Why are we creating the impression as if once you vote, your vote will straight away add up in a system? Importantly, whatever it is, it will still be done manually. And what I think the Senate has done currently is to say, look, okay, we agree, we will make it mandatory where technology is working perfectly fine, power is fine, but where you have problems, then resort to the primary source, which is from ECHA. I think that's a very balanced approach to this.
Let them make it mandatory. First.
Even when technology fails and there's no power.
How can technology fail? When the beavers retains power itself, and the beavers acts like a smartphone that it can transmit from anywhere.
Mr. Fred, let's not forget that there are times that technology will fail you. Let's not also forget that, because it seems like we're missing that point.
When we are planning.
We've also seen that the server being hijacked at some point.
In order to avoid that, people have suggested that should be collaboration with a company called Starlink, which they have come out to say, with us, it is almost like you're hitting the satellite direct.
Even the owner of Starlink
said,
the owner of Starlink, talking about Elon Musk, he said, I'm a bigger spender when it comes to technology. I love technology, but I will never support computation of voting. That what he supports is physical voting, which happened in the United States in 2024.
Elon Musk.
What do you about physical voting? Are we not doing physical voting?
No, he said he would not. You are talking about using Starlink. He said
it is human being that will collate, fine, but I'm talking about tracing the fault. Electronically will help you to trace the fault, It will help you to trace the fault.
But we've been doing
so that when 700 becomes 7,000, we will know. And we will know the source. It becomes easy.
Okay,
that
we
INEC
have
for
to.
politicians?
We have to.
It is both.
We have to go.
INEC does that in cahoots with politicians because somebody takes benefit for such
Thank you so much.
for such misdemeanor.
Thank you so
And
much.
whoever takes such benefit is the one that will be called to account for it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mr. Fred. A very beautiful conversation.
Many thanks,
It was
many
great
thanks.
having you on the